Okay, so to just wrap up that whole story, my whole goal is to point out that our history, that word, his story. What about her story? What about every other version of events? When you have writing, you also have the ability to manipulate that story. And since the advent of writing, the writing that we know, there have also been weapons. The Bronze Ages, Iron Ages, all of that comes along with a shift in the story that was being told, a rewrite of the past. And when you think about how every lineage was always matriarchal because people only knew what the woman, they only would know the birth of a child would have to do with the woman, not the male. They didn't have paternity tests back in the day. It took a long time to understand that they used to tell women to have sex with a bunch of men and they'd get the best qualities of each one. You know, it took a long time to figure that out. So the woman's body was always associated with the earth, was associated with this knowledge, this wisdom. And so it's a shift in the story to push women out of the picture. Now that is a huge piece of our holiday traditions and how we celebrate them. And what I'm saying is every tradition around the world celebrated the winter solstice as life starting again, this rebirth every day. Virginity in the ancient religious Egyptian story was about a perpetual virginity of the female in the best way. Every morning she was birthed a virgin again. She was born again. She was a virgin again. So this idea of the modern version of the perfect woman being a virgin mother, a mother who never had sex. That doesn't make sense. It doesn't exist. And it doesn't exist because you need to have that unity, that pleasure to have the birth. And birth is not a punishment, people. Birth is a beautiful, powerful thing that these powerful men at the time were jealous of, right? These were people that wanted to shift the story. And I'm not demonizing men in general. I'm just saying these were men trying to change the story. These were very warrior-focused people. And when you look at all culture across all time, you will have people that are more warrior-like and there are people that are more balanced. And they're not always men, they're not always women. Where I was going at it with before is there are very strong women who can very often outbeat many men, right? There are many women that could outbeat many men. The top male will probably always beat the top female, except in a few things. Like I think there's some climbing challenges and some swimming things where the best person in the entire world is actually a female. But men have been trained and adapted to a world where to be the strongest was more beneficial to them, whether it was for utility reasons or like practical reasons, have your better survival, or that attracted the women, right? Maybe the women just liked that more. Who knows? That was just what happened over time. Men got just a couple inches taller than a female. But some of the best women stick in the minds and of our past history and our past story of his, the nightmare, right? That comes back to the story about the female warriors that would ride on horses that everyone was afraid of. That is a hark back to the time when the female goddess, the female warriors were revered and very important. And this 5,000 years of writing and male domination is very recent time in our shared story. There was hundreds of thousands of years of men coming after the women, right? When you think about who has more sex in a relationship, male on male sex has way more than heterosexual and way more than a lesbian sex. That is because men are constantly seeking sex and women have to be the gatekeepers because they are the ones who have to carry that child and nurture that child. And that child's survival rate depends on that mom being special and cared for. That child's survival rate goes up if the father's around, and that child's survival rate goes up even more if the grandmother's around. And the grandmother lives longer because they're taking care of each other. There's this thing called the grandmother effect that most mammals don't live past menopause, don't live past this fertile age. Toddler survivalhood, more than, like if a toddler, like siblings make a difference. If a mother has a baby, she needs all these other things. The more support, the better survival rate of that child. But if the grandmother's around, the toddler survival rate skyrockets up. They were mutually important to each other, the grandmother and the toddler of that family unit, which is exactly what I'm coming to, this whole holy trinity of life creating life, love creating life. And it comes to that calendar. So I'm saying Christmas, this idea of life being born again, the idea of the Son being born, the Son associated with our children, a child, not just a male child, any child. The sun god Ra, the sun Re, is associated with kingship. The same word Re, the Egyptian sun god, influenced both reign of a king, Re as well as the sun Re. And there's many more influences in that word. That child is the noonday sun, the mother's the morning rising sun, and the father is the setting sun. There are many different versions of how this story is played out, whether it was in the spring. The spring is this time of sexual fertility, of heavy waters. In Egyptian, it was the flooding of the Nile. That was the start of the season. And then for Easter, it was the heavy rainy season. So both of these moments were very significant. And the significance is that this union, this equal balance of light and day, was the perfect moment to create a child. 9 months later, that son is born, that child. And that son child, not just a S-O-N, but also a daughter, could be that. I'm saying it doesn't matter what the gender of that son is. The idea is that the creation of life is the reason we are celebrating Christmas, right? And that comes back to Holy Night. All of our favorite stories are about that. It still comes back to that, no matter which religion you believe in. Holy nights are about this child being born on that night. And Easter is about a sexual union that comes 9 months prior to that. Now, that is a beautiful thing that anyone can get around. Now, when we look at the names of our holidays, Christmas, and then we have Easter. Easter's a Germanic name. Everywhere else in the English world that speaks the Latin-based languages, they all call it Pascha, or some version of Passover, because it was based on a Jewish holiday at that season. Everyone else has it, but that season in every other Latin-based language, aside from English, calls it Pascha. Because Christianity doesn't exist on its own. It wasn't a spontaneous thing. It's a copycat of all these other things, a derivation. It's not isolated. It wanted to separate itself. So it said, oh, you know what? Anyway, English is this mix of Germanic tribes in Britain pushing out the Latins.
Jaden's just already awake.
Jaden's awake too?
Yeah.
Okay, I have another child. Hold on. My other son is awake. My other sun god is alive.